All right, hello and welcome everybody to another episode of the Team Next Level Quad Pod. I'm Greg and I'm joined by my normal co-hosts Marilyn and Rich, but back for her third time.
Fourth time
On the show.
The abnormal co-host.
Our recurring stand-in co-host, Abnormal. Yvonne Lucino, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Yvonne made James sick this week again.
I know. I
That's
feel
how
like
she gets on.
She does. She's like, I feel like I want to be on the podcast this week.
I feel like James's
it's
pillow.
time for me to set the record straight. There is nothing that emits from me at any time. I've been healthy. I am not any type of carrier monkey for James. But James is hopefully 3 daiquiris deep in good old Jamaica, man.
Yeah. He's enjoying his vacation.
Well deserved.
That man needs
deserved.
to chill out.
Standing
for a while.
ovation. Well done, James. I hope you are.
We have applause on this thing.
Yes. Okay.
And we get to use it.
Yeah, we don't really get to use the soundboard.
There you go.
So James we put on the PV try yesterday, August 13th. And we are joined today not just by our recurring co-host, but by racing royalty.
She is now a podium first
Not
place.
just a podium.
Official.
Top step of the podium.
Yes.
Yvonne, you can give us a better recap than we could possibly give, having raced and won. Was this your first?
No, kidding.
Was this your first race ever?
Was this your first race win that you've had?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. It's my second sprint. I did NJ State earlier. That was supposed to be Olympic. It turned into a sprint because of weather. And I generally didn't prefer sprints, but now that I've won one, it's become my favorite.
It's your favorite.
I love this.
Do what you're good at.
I actually wasn't going to participate because
last minute
I was going to volunteer, and then James had asked me to sit in for him during the podcast, and I said, "Sure. What are we going to talk about?" He's like, "The PV Try recap," and I was like, "Well, wait a minute. I should run the race because then I'll have something to say." So I think it was like 2 days before. I kept still going back and forth, and he's like, "I'm just going to register you. Just do it." So, and I'm so glad I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, every time I saw you on the course, you looked like you were doing,
I know, you
like you were
so
flying,
happy.
and you had a big smile on your face.
Yeah. I was telling someone today and yesterday, I'm like, I wish I knew what it was, and I don't know if it was just. I had such appreciation for the race. I mean, there's always that back end work that goes into any race that's put on, obviously, big or small. But just knowing how much care and time everyone on this panel and James also put into this race to make it fun for everyone, that I don't know if that's just what, gave me that extra burst of energy, or I had 99% of the volunteers on the course were either related to me or on my, whether it was blood related or team related. So it was like every corner I turned, it was someone else I knew. And it was just like, it was a race for me. I was just flying
awesome.
high.
It was
so much
It was
fun.
just
Great
a race
feeling.
for you.
It was. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. And it was for a good cause. And I'm like, I wish I could bottle up that formula because, man, if I can have that much energy, I mean, all day long, I never had a crash. I wasn't I was still going. I mean, I crashed at 9:00 at night, but I was feeling really good. I'm like, man, that was
great every time I saw you.
Yeah.
so much fun.
Yeah.
So much fun. But every time I try to pull back, there was someone else I knew, and I was like, I gotta look good. So it just made me keep going. And I never ever run straight through the run course. And it was a hilly course.
Yeah.
So even with that, I was like, ugh. And I was like, oh, let me see how far I can do this. And I kept on going. And I was like, I feel okay. And I just kept on running and I ran the entire time.
Yay,
So
look at you.
yeah.
And then you went back
And
out
then
for
you went.
another run.
I did.
That wasn't enough.
It wasn't. No,
Sure.
Coach John had planned a run. He wanted to make sure I got my long run in for the weekend. And he's like, do the course, finish, and do it again. So
She almost missed her medal.
Oh, did you?
She wasn't there for
She
it.
ran into the
She
medal.
ran into
Oh, that's like the ultimate flex, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Like
I was just going to do it
win your
again.
age group, and not only are you sitting there waiting for your medal, you come in after an extra run to accept your award. Like, oh, you sluck. You guys all suck. I had to get a little bit of extra work.
I had
in here.
announced it even because she didn't come up for the medal, and I was
I
like,
came
"Oh,
from
Yvonne's out
behind.
for another run." And then she comes from behind, like
I was
over
like,
the
I'm
table.
here. I'm here. I was coming through the back and I had just finished. I think I was like checking in with my husband and they were getting ready to go. And I saw the award ceremony going and I had to get my run in because I was volunteering for the Splash and Dash for the kids. And I'm like, okay, if I checked in with Marilyn, I'm like, what time does the Splash and Dash start? If I do my run now, I can finish and then go volunteer. And then I saw when I came back, the ceremony was going on and I was not thinking I would get anything, but I was like, oh, I'm missing it. So I ran back down and I just hear Marilyn and I faintly hear Yvonne Lucino and I'm almost like, I don't know if I'm delirious right now because I've been running.
That second run hit hard.
And I'm like, and I hear her say, Yvonne actually is not here because I'm like, she said my name. And I just come from behind and I was like, I'm here. And then I'm like, what did I win? And she's like, first. And I was like, what? And we both looked at each other. She's like, yeah. So even that was so exciting because it was Marilyn announcing it and she just gave me a big
Into
hug.
the megaphone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yelling
people
in
were
your
probably
face,
like,
"You
who the
won."
hell is this girl? But I had the new tri-kit on, so I was like
Yep.
extra official.
Looking
And
so good.
Yeah.
it was so
good.
much fun.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the race a little bit.
At any time when you were out there, did you think you might get your name called?
Yeah. How did you?
I was just curious.
I thought if there was any chance, I didn't really like scope out my competition because I wasn't planning on running and I didn't know anyone. I wasn't familiar with anyone. So I was like, if anything, like I figure, maybe like I'd come in like third or something.
Mhm.
So when I had come down, I was figuring she would say something like that. And so when she said first, I was like, no way. And she's like, right. And I was like, oh my God. Like we were
did not
both
say
like,
right.
but she just
I
like
was
looked at
like-
me like, yeah, right. So, and my sister was there because she had volunteered. So she got to see that. And it's like, you live this world that just makes sense to you because like I'm around it all the time in my time, but like my family's not there, so like the kids saw me
Yeah.
running
Oh, that's
and
great.
my sister, like I said, she saw me win the award and
Mhm.
it was just like it was such a good day. It was
Yeah.
really, really fun. I'm like, I should just retire because I don't think it'd get any better. But yeah, the race itself, so much fun. And I was not the only one who said that, but let's talk about that slide start.
Oh,
Yeah. What'd you?
Bravo Yale. I mean, I have to give it to him. I thought it was either going to be amazing or a disaster. And
Nothing in between, right?
No,
Yeah.
no.
There's no way it was going to be in between.
I just figured it was either, the first time or the last time that this was going to happen.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And it worked out really beautifully.
Yeah.
Like there was a good time in between each person that went down. It was so funny because all these, people who are getting ready to do a triathlon and the distances, I think ended up being a 250 swim and a 10-mile bike and the 5K run.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So these people are getting ready to do that and all they're panicking about is this slide.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was a great like icebreaker, like just
Yeah.
way to kind of cut through the tension of like a normal race start.
Yeah.
Like just make
Yeah.
it
Just
like
when you're
hey,
online and someone else is going, woohoo!
Oh
Yeah.
my God, yes.
Yeah.
And you're like,
all
well,
the
I
way
guess I
down.
got to do that.
I
Of
guess I
all
gotta have fun now.
ages.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I think every race should start with the
Start with the slide.
We need to have like a microphone up at the top too,
Yeah.
Right.
so
That
that
would
everyone
be fun.
hears it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like, so the race, the timing person was up there and she's like asking you for your number and she's like, all right, go. And you're like, okay. Like, and then you're just, and it's a big slide too. So
Yeah.
like, it was a nice time on it. So then I was worried about my goggles and if they were going to get thrown off or like how I was going to be ejected off the slide. But it was fine. It was really good. The only thing is it created like this current
Yeah.
in the pool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just kept on bouncing in between like a
The
pin,
lanes,
like
yeah.
a pinball, And I was like, is this me? I mean, that's always the thing when you swim. You feel like, is this only happening to me right now? And I'm like, I am a terrible swimmer. Like, I didn't think I was that bad. And I just couldn't, kept on having to swim against it. But that was good. And then the bike, what was great about it for me was that we are often somewhere along that route when we do our rides. We've done our time trials there. So I knew when I can push it. I knew when I had to kind of, take a minute so that I could explode. So being familiar with the course was really helpful. I'm like, oh, I know what's coming up next. So it was that was really great. And my brother-in-law and my sister were on the course. And then I saw two of our teammates. Reggie was on the first corner, and I was like, all right, I have to pass Reggie 3 times. And after I pass Reggie 3 times, I'm done. So every time I was like, Reggie, that's 1. And he'd be like, 1, Yvonne. So that was like so much fun. And then I almost cheated my way to victory because there was like a little confusion. I was, I knew what I had to do.
Reggies.
Exactly. And that's what I said. I was like, I only saw Reggie twice. There's 1 Reggie missing. So I passed through and I was like, I'm not done yet. So I had to go back on the bike and do my last loop. I also saw Henry, who was the winner, come from behind me. And I wasn't surprised that he passed me, but I was like, there's no way that I'm done if Henry's already done. So I knew something was off. So that was good. And then, like I said, the run was hilly, but I felt all right. I mean, I've been doing hill sprints since August of last year. So I feel like, they finally made sense to me. It was like a Mr. Miyagi moment where I was on the hill sprint and I was like, actually, I've been doing this. So this isn't so bad. So I just tackled those and that was it. I came in and I gave Dave, one of our PTs here, he was giving medals. I gave him a big sweaty hug. So that made it worth it. And that was it. And did my run again. So that was my experience.
Wow.
Awesome.
Yeah. So really, really well done. I mean, like I said, I don't know how people feel and there's always things to make better and room for improvement. But I think the overall, I spoke with some people today that participated and they said the same. It's a really lighthearted race and but still challenging. I mean, it's a challenge. It's not like an easy course.
Right.
Yeah.
Not at all. It's not easy at all. So, but there's just a feel of it. You just really... it's fun. So anyone who, question themselves about participating, you really missed out. Make sure you schedule for your calendars next year, whatever time. It's probably going to be around the same weekend.
Right.
Pencil that in, start riding your bike. It's really attainable. It's the 10 mile, I think it makes it really nice because it's not too much. And, again, the thoughtfulness that goes into it, it's like you're really, and we raise money for the Helping Hand, so it's a good cause. I mean, you really can't go wrong. So if you don't want to do everything and you can do a swim or a bike or a run, like get yourself a team together, start making plans for next year because you really just don't want to miss out and it just keeps getting better. So last year I thought it went really well and I volunteered. So to participate in it and it was even better, I could only imagine it, even if it stayed the same, would be really fun. So get out there next year for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it's great to hear from your side of the thing.
Yeah.
We'll definitely bring some more to you guys in the future about kind of the behind the scenes stuff and what it takes to put on an event like this and lessons learned and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, we lost James, so clearly.
It
takes a lot out of you.
Right
He needed
after.
a vacation after.
There was a splash and dash.
I don't even think he had a ticket. He just disappeared.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think one of the reasons you had such a great race, Yvonne, was because you paced it so well. You were able to just kind of like meter that effort from the swim to the bike to the run. And that's kind of what we decided to talk about tonight was how do you go about doing that? How do you go about setting up kind of like a race plan, right, Rich?
Yeah. So when you think about doing a race, everybody trains and everybody's got a plan for their training. Everybody's got a coach or something or their own training. And then come race time or whatever races they've picked, they know that they can put the practice into the race. But you need to be able to think about that particular race and actually plan for the pace of every leg of that event and how you're going to do with a lot of things in mind. I think it's an important and a big part of not just training for the race, but actually executing on that day.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe one of the most important things you can do. Like, no matter what your training has looked like, if you plan poorly for execution, then it could go south real quick, and you could have a really ugly day. Like the fittest person on the planet could pace poorly, and they're going to be walking.
I saw someone comment on some page somewhere that they signed up for a race and they were, thinking it was going to be okay, and it was however much elevation on the bike, and then they were like, "Oh, and I think I didn't check the fact that it was 2 loops," and now I'm worried.
No.
So it's like, it's that kind of thing. Like, everything's not going to go perfect, but if you have a plan, you should be able to kind of put it on paper and kind of understand what you're expecting that day.
Yeah. And I think as you get more involved in the sport, do more races, build more of kind of a knowledge base, that plan is going to go from being relatively simple to eventually it might get to the point where it is unbelievably detailed. And we'll kind of go over some of those different pieces and stuff.
You'll even be out there, and some longer races you might see, like, because of the knowledge and experience that you have, you'll see somebody who isn't as knowledgeable and experienced not do as well as you, because that they're overdoing stuff. So you can kind of also see that over time.
Yeah.
So it's a big part. You should definitely be thinking about it, and that's what we're going to talk about.
Yep. So where do we start?
Well, I think we can say, okay, if you've got the training in, like, is there something you can go to? We have all these resources now, and figure out what the race plan pace should be for my race, right? There's stuff out there, right?
Yeah. So I guess we'll start
searching
with like ideal, right? Like trying to plan for that ideal race scenario, and then we'll get into how to modify that initial kind of broad strokes plan into something.
Everybody should know, that there are pace calculators that are out there that they can find online. I don't have a particular one. I know Greg probably does, but I think that they're all probably going to give you a better understanding of what that's going to look like for you on race day. If you find something that you like, put in all the parameters and have it give you something that you can consider for that day.
When I started running, I used just pace charts. Like, I would put in whatever time, and then it would tell me, okay, you could finish in this time. This is what your splits need to be. This would be your finish time, and that was helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that you're going to find one calculator that's going to do your whole race for you for a triathlon. I think you're going to probably have to go to sport-specific ones. Yeah. But like you said, Marilyn, those are the easiest way is search swimming triathlon pace chart or something, or 70.3 swimming pace chart, and the first couple hits are going to bring you to a chart that does exactly what you said and give you an idea.
Yep. And even those, if there's no particular pace chart, you can kind of create one or think about one from if the race has been in the same venue for the same distance for previous years.
Yeah.
So you can look at past years and start thinking about times and things like that.
Using them, though, before you even start, you have to be honest with yourself on what your capability is. Like, you can't go to a pace chart and say, well, I want to finish a marathon in 3 hours, and say, okay, I'm going to do that pace.
Yeah.
Because you're just going to, it doesn't work that way. You have to be.
The other way around.
You have to be honest.
You have to put in your parameters
what
and
you're
have it tell you
capable
what
of.
you're going to
Right,
finish.
exactly.
Rather than, I can do a 3-hour marathon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and definitely not the day of the race. If you go on something and you plan for that, then no matter what you're feeling on race day, if it's outside, like way outside of your norm, then you're not where you need to be.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, I think it was my first half marathon. It was a flat course, and I remember when I was doing it, I was running, we were feeling good. I ran with a friend of mine, and I knew where we always trained. I knew what number we needed to be. And the day was just like the perfect day for running. So you felt really good, really strong. And all of a sudden you get like your feet come from under you. And all of a sudden I'm looking at my watch and I'm like, we don't run this fast. And it was like, oh, but you feel good. It's like, no, we got to pull. And I kept on saying, I'm like, you got to pull it back. You got to. And I could feel it every time. Like it went, it was just like that perfect day. And it got away from you for a second. And I'm like, nope, this is still too fast. And I was like, all right, we got to stay where we trained up until like the last mile, the last 1 or 2 miles. If we're still feeling good, let's kill it. That last mile, we'll just go. And we did, and we finished really well. We finished strong. And that day, I remember specifically, there were so many people that I know that participated in that race, and they all bonked because they felt really good. And all of a sudden, like they got to that mile 9, mile 10, and they just died. And they had such a different experience than I did, because it was like, you know, I just stayed committed to where I was. And, you know, that's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're fooling yourself to think that you're going to do something on race day that you haven't done in training.
Absolutely.
Like, you know, especially in triathlon, when you put all 3 of them together, like if I haven't ridden for whatever, let's say you're a 3-hour cyclist and a half Ironman. If I haven't ridden at that power or that heart rate for 3 hours, I'm not suddenly going to do it on race day. Like, that's not the time to
There's
be
not
like,
that much endorphins running through you.
Not for 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
You know, same thing with the run. Like in a half marathon, like maybe you, like you're saying, you have that endorphin rush, that fuel is easy going to last you for the time. Like you might be able to push it a little bit, but not at the end of a triathlon, you know? So you definitely need to have done all those things in the lead up. And so you should be able to be honest with yourself.
So when do you look for what your race plan or race pace should be? Do you look at it before training, middle of training, a month out, 2 weeks out?
I think you should
all of those.
Yeah. Right.
Just keep looking at it. And
because
adjusting.
you're hoping you're getting fitter. So you got to keep checking in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you might start with, I'm here. I'd like to be here. And then hopefully as training goes on, those 2 lines come closer and closer to one another. And by close to race day, you're able to narrow in on that. Okay, here's where I'm at. Here's where I want to be. And those 2 things are really close to each other. So let's enact a plan on that. But you ultimately have to pick the plan based off of where you're at that point in time.
Not where you want to be, where you are.
Yeah. So since it's definitely 3 separate sports you have to look at, you kind of need to have some kind of benchmark in all 3 separately. So for swimming, there's kind of like 2, I think, that are, maybe there's 3 things that people use to sort of set their benchmark, threshold, whatever you want to call it. I don't know if I want to use, I wrote threshold in the notes, but I feel like you might think it's something other than it is, like a benchmark. So in swimming, there's the CSS test. I think we've all done that, where it's like a 400 time trial, a little bit of a break, and then a 200, and you put it into an online calculator and it gives you a time. That's valid. I really like as you get closer to your event, either 1,000 or a 1,500 yard or meter time trial, just because it's real world, you know, like it's, unless you're getting into the Ironman distance stuff, it's pretty close to the actual distance you're going to be swimming in a race. So I think that gives you a better idea of threshold. It's probably in that 20 to 30 minute time frame also. So like that's sort of where your thresholds normally, you're able to pinpoint them a little bit more accurately. So, and then there's some people who really like to use like a test set, you know, Dr. John's talked about him before on his YouTube channel, but like 10 100s or 10 200s, or, you know, some people do 300, like something that's in that 1,000 to 2,000 yard range that you can get an idea of like where your number's at, you know,
average it out.
Yeah. And so you get an idea of like, okay, this is a pace I can hold for an extended period of time. So you use that. Bike, I think the FTP is kind of the clear metric that most people use. Some people use something called critical power, but I'd say the majority of people are on 10 FTP. And then for running, your 10K time, you know, your open 10K time, not at the end of triathlon, is a good metric to get you to some kind of, you know, a threshold. I really like the Macmillan calculator, which calculates something called VDOT, and it looks at race experience, race time, and then it gives you a score. And then that score helps you figure out your times for everything from like a 400 repeat all the way out to the marathon. And it'll give you splits for everything based on your VDOT score. So I really like using that. But you definitely need to have some kind of threshold to start to play with and figure out those times. So, and then I think the biggest thing that's going to play a factor in figuring out your pacing guide is what race you're doing. You know, so if you try and pace your sprint triathlon at the same pace you do an Ironman, one of those is not going to be your best performance.
With the bike and you have your 20-minute FTP, does it make sense to do any kind of longer benchmark if you're going to do a longer race like a 70.3 or 140.6?
I think so. Yeah. So FTP is like the number that you should be able to hold for somewhere between 30 minutes and 60 minutes. Not everybody can hold FTP for an hour, and it's still their FTP physiologically. But once you get out towards that end of the power curve, there's really not, it's pretty predictable what the change is going to be, you know? So like as you double the time, power goes down by about 5%. So from an hour to 2 hours.
Only 5%.
Only 5%. It's surprisingly, right?
Oh.
Now that's just for cycling by itself in an all-out effort. So if you can hold your FTP for an hour, you can probably hold 95% of FTP for 2 hours.
95%.
Which seems
That
really
seems
freaking hard.
really hard.
But you do need to have that as part of your training. You can't just be like, oh, I did it for an hour. Now tomorrow I can go do it for 2 hours. Like that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But physiologically, that's about the drop you get.
Yeah. I was just asking about benchmarking.
Yeah. So one of the things
FTPs.
I do, I have software that I can kind of look at all different mean maximal power, like what they hold for this time, what they hold for that time. And when I'm looking for those 70.3 stuff, I'm kind of care about FTP, but I really look at like what's the best 2 hour power they're doing, what's the best 3 hour power they're doing, and I want to see those things go up more than I want to see FTP go up.
Yeah. So then that begs the question of you're kind of doing the race pace for yourself, but you have your FTP, which is on a trainer most likely, unless you're doing some kind of flat test outside, and you've got a race that's coming up that's going to be pretty hilly.
Yeah.
So then what do you need to think about in terms of either changing the benchmark, or how do you think about the FTP benchmark when you have to apply it to, elevation of, let's say, 4,000 feet?
Do we want to get into all that right now?
When do we want to get into it? Let's get into it.
Yeah, okay,
let's get dirty.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll look at the course and I'll...
You're laughing.
Do you know why I'm laughing?
I think I do.
No. Okay.
How are you going to look at the course?
Yvonne, how am I going to look at the course? Gotta.
We'll come back to how you're going to look at the course. Okay. All right. We'll get to it.
Yeah, we'll get there.
We'll get there.
So
stay tuned, listeners.
Yeah.
Go to minute X.
Yeah.
You'll find out why Greg's laughing.
I've never seen Greg blush so
yeah, I know. In the same color as the drink.
You have to be careful what you say around here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which we haven't talked about.
So it depends on the race. Like 4,000 feet of climbing can come at you in very different ways.
Yeah.
4,000 feet can be a bunch of really short, punchy climbs, or it can be,
Gradual.
a few more sustained climbs. And so like when Marilyn was getting ready for, do you want to talk about kind of how?
No, I was going to compare.
Or
no, I mean we can, but I was going to compare the first race we did.
Oh yeah,
with
that's
Connecticut.
Great.
They were similar elevation, but completely different.
Yeah,
because of the hills and the pitch of the hills.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead. Double click on that. Tell us more.
So the one just had much steeper climb, which made it harder. So you have to pace it differently.
Fascinating.
He's pouring, so he's not.
Can't pour and talk at the same time.
I know. What were you going to say about it?
Me?
Yeah.
I was just going to say that there's still a little bit left. It really depends on that. So
how should you go about, before we get into it really depends on that, thinking about it, right? You've got your FTP.
Yeah. So in a perfect world, the fastest way to ride any course or run any course for that matter is even pacing. Perfectly steady power the whole way through. The problem with that is on a hilly course, you aren't going to be able to apply that power downhill, right? So how do you make up for that lack of applying power? Yes, you're going faster, but you're also covering that distance really quick. So you're going to be climbing for a longer period of time. So you're going to need to go over your goal. Like if my goal is to hold 200 watts for the average power for the race, because I know I can hold 200 watts for 3 hours, then I'm going to need to kind of use a little bit more than 200 watts on the uphills and a lot less potentially on the downhills. How am I going to meter that out depends on the nature of those hills, right? So the shallower and longer the hills are going to be, the less over my goal wattage I'm going to be able to go. The shorter and punchier they are, the more over I can go, because I'm not going to be climbing for as long. I'm not going to kind of develop that long-term fatigue in a short, punchy climb as I am, but it's also going to add up, those short, punchy ones. So like you have to be very careful. I think a short, punchy course is probably the hardest thing to effectively pace and get the fastest time possible on.
Yeah. I think it's also hard with like, those are harder for me for maintaining nutrition and stuff, because it's like you really can't like take a minute to refuel because you're just like up, down, and not digesting, and you don't want to be like taking anything in while you're really putting a lot of power out.
It all depends. You can get really thorough and detailed. I mean, for Mont Tremblant, it was pretty detailed. But you also have to pay a lot of attention to your effort that you're putting in.
Yeah. I think you get to the point where you're tied, dialed into what those efforts feel like.
Yeah.
So for our listeners, another thing to consider as you pace your race is doing the rides on software that has those races simulated. I know Ruby has it, Trainer Road has it. Some races, depending on which ones you're doing.
What's the one you used?
No, it wasn't Ruby. It was the other one, the Ironman one. What the heck was it called? I don't remember.
Full gas.
Full gas.
Full
Yeah,
gas.
full gas.
Yeah, full gas. So
and it was really good.
Yeah,
Were they only Ironman races for that?
They
one?
have most of the I don't know if most, but they have a lot of them on there.
Yep.
Any non-Ironman races on that one?
Yes.
They have different courses, yeah.
So you're going to be able, you don't have to ride that course all the time to give yourself a sense, but you can ride certain sections of it so that, if you're not living in that area, you get a better sense of your pacing strategy for that day. And definitely to Greg's point, you're going to pace differently for a flat course like, Maryland versus Mont Tremblant, right? Because you're going to have a different strategy for it. So that's a key thing about like not only thinking about FTP, but the actual event that you're going to do. What about the run in terms of hilly, not hilly pace? So like how did you do your runs, Marilyn?
Similar.
Did you just think of like, I need to, at the end, average my whatever pace?
I think at first you have to look, it's very similar. You have to look at what the hills are like, where they are in the course, and manage your pace.
So I think one of the things Rich keeps bringing up is this idea of average pace. The hillier the course is, the less average pace is a good metric of what you're doing.
Yeah.
You might have a pace that you're going to think about for the uphills and a pace that you're going to think about for the downhills, or a power that you're going to work on the uphills, a power you're going to work on the flats. Because, I kind of bring this back to my classroom. I tell, when we talk about averages, right? Like average is a good metric when all the numbers are sort of kind of clustered.
Normal distribution.
Yeah. The wider that distribution or the bigger your standard deviation gets, the less useful average is as a single number. A kid who gets half of their grades are hundreds and half of their grades are Fs gets a C. That's not a C student, right? a C student's a kid who gets all stuff in that C with a couple of B's and D's. Like, so average isn't always the best. Some of the stuff like with normalized power does a decent job of like weighting towards taking out those zeros from the coasting downhill and stuff. But the tougher your race is from that kind of thing, the more you have to really focus on your planning and like pay attention to what's going on with it, because again, you can't do, if you're doing 200 watts uphill, you're going to be going really slow if you're an average size person, but you can't do it downhill. So like you're going to drive yourself nuts trying to do it. So you have to plan for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So now I think we kind of sidetracked a little bit, but we were going to bring it back to like the specific races, right? The distances really mean a lot in terms of your planning. So like shorter ones, what should you be thinking about there if you're going to do something like a sprint?
So I think a shorter one, a sprint, like you have to probably, I think they're always going to have to be like, I have to dial this back, but a sprint the most. I think a sprint, because you're so close to red line the whole time, you have a tendency, like the closer you are to the red line, it's easier to go over it. So you do have to pay attention to making sure you're not, yes, the whole race might take an hour and 10 or an hour and 15 minutes, but
1:13.
I was going to say, let's see how long it actually takes.
But you can't race each event at its absolute limit for the distance that you're covering, right? So you couldn't, if you swam a 250 meter all out swim, what would have happened for the rest of the race? Like it would have been.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I just kind of swam comfortably where I felt like I was moving, but I also just kept in mind that it was like I didn't want to. It was nice because it was attainable. It was short enough to say like, okay, this is not gonna last too long. I knew where my times were, but then also just not to wipe myself out, and then also like something like that current that happened. That was taking a lot of my energy out, so I had to adjust for that as well. So I never try to kill it in the swim just because, one, I'm not a strong swimmer, and two, I know that I have 2 more legs to go. So I just want to, be consistent, be strong, and then move on.
Yeah.
I think sorry.
Go ahead.
That's the thing with triathlon. You can't try and have a personal best on all 3. Right?
Yeah. So I think with the swim and a sprint, you can probably swim right at that threshold number, maybe a little bit faster than it, but right in that neighborhood. Like you said, you want to have it almost feel easy. And in swimming, like a 2 or 3 second per 100 difference in time has a huge difference in feel, right? And perceived exertion. So dialing it back just that little tiny bit isn't going to cost you much at all in time. So, right at that threshold number is probably okay. As the races get longer, nobody knows. Do you really know what you're swimming pace at? Like I get a buzz on my watch every 200 and I look at it, but it's more just for peace of mind than it is for actual pacing. Rarely am I like, oh, you're really loafing it, or oh, you're pushing too hard. It kind of so I break it down into feels, and like I like to think of swimming like, so I wrote on this thing, like for an Olympic and a half, those need to be thought of as the same swim wise because they're almost the same distance, right? 1500 versus 1900. I like to think of your swim should feel strong. You shouldn't ever feel like you're really loafing it. You shouldn't feel like you're winded and like sprinting. It's just strong.
Shouldn't be having a conversation in the water either.
It's just the voices in my head, right? And then I think for the full, it should feel easy because you're going to be swimming for, it's the start of a very long day. So keep it easy.
Yeah.
So I don't like to put, X percentage of your threshold for those longer ones just because I don't think it's realistic. Who knows, especially open water. Like what if there's a current? What if there's, big waves? What if
people in your way?
Yeah. Like just
start getting up and walking across the
sand. So with those, just go by feel, and I like to think simple with the feels.
What about the bike legs for the shorter and longer races?
So I did put numbers on these. The bike numbers are a huge range. But for like a sprint, you're kind of in that 90 to 92% range of FTP. That's a strong effort. You're going to be moving pretty quick. The faster you are, the higher up the percentage scale you can go because you're out there for less time. So maybe up to 95%, 98% maybe. It depends on how long you can hold FTP for too. Some people whose FTP they can only hold for 30 minutes, so you need to be lower down on the percentage for that. Olympic is probably just under 90% for a lot of people. Half Ironman, you're looking at the generally accepted number is about 85%, but that is skewed a little towards a faster athlete. 75 to 88 or so percent. The pros are probably pushing closer to 90% because they're only on the bike for 2 hours, versus 3 hours. So you have to make that adjustment. The longer you're out there, the lower that percentage has to be. And then for a full, you're in like the 67 to 8, maybe 80% is a huge high number. But that's again for people pushing 4 to 4.5 hour bike legs on the Ironman. So you got that. I think the biggest thing is like dialing in what you've done in training and see how that feels and be able to try and recreate that on race day.
I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but how does like heart rate factor into it when it is race day?
Yeah, that's hard. Everybody's different. My heart rate is way elevated on race day.
Yeah.
So I almost don't pay attention to it.
Really?
Yeah, just because I wish I could be like, oh, every race day, it's 5 beats higher than it should be.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like it's so variable. And so I really don't listen to heart rate too much. So other people, if yours is the same, then it's a good thing to use, because if you start to see that heart rate, and maybe that is where I use it. If I start to see the heart rate drifting up at 10 minutes, like at Eagleman this year, my heart rate was up. I wanted to hit like 155 was kind of like where I thought it would be, and it was more like closer to 160, like 157, 158, 159 most of the time. And I knew that was okay, like that 4 beats off, 3 beats off, but it stayed there the whole ride. If I had started to see it creep up at the same power, then I would have dialed things back. So I use it. That's kind of where it plays more of a role for me, is if I'm seeing some kind of drift and it's not getting hotter.
Yeah, I was going to say, because weather can affect it too.
Yeah. I know I was high for AC.
If the weather's affecting it, like you still might need to dial it down.
Back.
So that for me is where heart rate's useful, but everybody's going to be different with that.
Yeah.
I use heart rate because it's pretty much the same race day or not.
Yeah.
So I take a look at it because, it's important to know when your body's going to be able to digest versus when it's too high, and what the weather is and how it's impacting it. The drift is important. So I pay more attention to it for sure. But it's individual.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I know my heart rate tends to run high. But for AC, something like that, like it was like 10 beats higher than normal. Whereas like yesterday it was high, but like you said, it just kind of sat there and I felt okay. Yeah. So it wasn't, there was times when I looked down and I was like, I feel like I'm not okay. Like I was maybe a little bit too excited. And then I pulled back a little bit just to make that adjustment. But outside of that, I could see how that is difficult to depend on.
And I mean, if you don't have power, that's kind of your only metric to be using. And again, it comes down to like what you've done in training. I kind of like, I feel like I know what the, 70.3 power or effort should feel like. And if my heart rate's elevated, but it still feels right, then I'm okay with it. It's like, if it's like, oh, this feels really hard and my heart rate's elevated, then maybe it's something to think about.
Yeah.
And make an adjustment for.
You have to analyze everything. You can't just go by one thing.
Right.
It is. I mean, my heart rate yesterday was like 185. That's where I go. I mean, you're talking about 155. I'm like, that sounds like
nice, right?
like a
but, I mean, that's for a half Ironman. I wouldn't be I wouldn't be at 185 on the bike for a sprint either, but
yeah, but that's just where I stand, and someone else might be. I mean, I would be on a tricycle if somebody was like, but I've always, I've had my heart rate checked. I mean, obviously, if people have any heart rate variables, definitely go to the doctor. But I checked it out, and it was like, yeah, that's just kind of where I live.
Yeah.
And I'm able to talk. I'm conversational. I'm not feeling it. To me, I have to see it a little bit more because be a little bit more subjective, I guess, about it, because like in typical terms, like I'm really high, but I'm also not struggling like someone else who, if you were in 185,
I've never gotten that high. I think like
I'm just a party.
Mid 180s are the danger zone for me. Like it's about to shut down.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever even gotten that high.
Yeah,
it's 175 maybe. I don't know.
I think it's a good thing that like I also know now my lactate threshold. So then you know your first and second inflection point, and you kind of, depending on, if it's a sprint race, fine, you can handle it. But if you're talking about longer distances and you know where your lactate inflection points are, your heart rate's going to play a bigger, it's going to be a bigger factor in deciding to pull back.
And that's where those heart rates maybe are more useful on a hilly course, because you do kind of know like, once I get above like 165, like I'm kind of getting to that danger zone of where like I can't keep that up for all that long. So if I'm climbing and I'm at 170 or 175, like, this is a short-lived story at this point, Right. So knowing those are useful.
Okay. Did we talk about the run, or did we get there?
No, we didn't. I think, I mean, I have percentages here. Maybe I'll just like link this in the show notes or something later, instead of just reading them off. I think the biggest thing is you can't expect your run pace in a standalone running race to be what you can run in a triathlon, right? You have to dial it back. So like if you can run a 5K at 5% faster than your threshold, you need to be at like 3% faster than threshold. You need to dial it back 2 or 3% from your open time to what you can do at the end of a race. And that kind of, the longer the race goes, the more you have to dial it back, So at the end of an Ironman, you can't be thinking like, I ran 3 hours in Chicago last year. I can do that at the end of Lake Placid. Like it's not happening. You're going to be walking the last half of the marathon. One thing that I've kind of heard people talk about is kind of a very broad way to get an idea for this is if you're running a 5K, like a sprint triathlon, use your open 10K time as a pace goal. If you're running an Olympic, use your open half marathon time as your 10K pace goal at the end of the tri, I don't know what you do for an Ironman run then. Use your 50-mile time.
Embrace the walk.
Yeah, embrace the walk. So there are numbers, percentages out there. Again, you look on some of those online calculators and you can find stuff, but you just have to dial it down. And probably the biggest, most important thing you could do is not start too fast. There was one study I came across that said that the fastest, this looked at 70.3 and full Ironman run splits. And the fastest run splits in both of those times, the person was within 5% of their average pace for their first mile. They were no more than 5% off in that first mile. So I did the math. If your goal is like 9-minute pace, which comes out to like a 2-hour, just under 2-hour half marathon, if you run that first mile under 8:33, you have a really good chance of blowing up. So don't sprint out of the blocks.
Never a good idea.
It's hard.
Yeah. And it's really hard because you're amped, you're ready to go. Yeah. Like so you're just moving at 20 something miles an hour on the bike.
And
like
it feels
you want to keep
slow.
Going, you know?
Your legs won't let you. Not on the longer distances.
They might let you for the first mile.
Sometimes, yeah, but it's,
Yeah. I mean, John told that story, right? When he was at AC, he ran out of the blocks at like 6-minute pace for the first 7 miles and then
blew up,
and everybody has stories like that. So you definitely have to take it easy. I've started trying to go like way slower than my goal pace in that first mile. And it's helped me, I think, because then I feel like I'm speeding up as the race goes on.
Yeah.
So again, not the best pacing strategy from am I going to get the absolute fastest time out of myself? But from just a mental aspect of feeling good on the run, it's helpful to come out really slow.
Yep.
Train.
That's really useful. That's good things to consider.
Yeah.
Now kind of like having all that, we haven't even talked about everything that can be considered for that particular race. And we thought we'd talk a little bit about those types of things that Yeah, when people make decisions, they make lists. Like here's
our list.
Here's our list of things to put on to think about, right?
Mm-hmm.
We kind of touched on some of them, but I think it makes sense to talk a little bit more about some of them.
Sure.
I'm looking forward to one in particular.
No.
Oh, me too.
No.
Yeah.
I quit.
Yvonne, why don't you start?
Yeah. What are you going to put down on paper?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to know what you're getting into, right? Right. So you got to do a little.
How are you going to find out? What do you do?
How do you look at the course?
Yeah.
How do you find out? What is
the word for that?
I don't know how to say this word, okay?
So can we hear all the ways that you might want to say this word?
Let our listeners decide what the right way is.
Yeah.
Let them write in and
clearly
tell us.
the right way is none of the ways that I have said this
Maybe
word.
they are.
I don't even know why I said this out loud.
Give it a try, because maybe you'll get it right
You're
this
right.
time.
Because the reaction from us would have been so much better had we not heard the other 3 ways that you might come out with this.
Yeah.
So sounds like I can't even Reconnaissance.
What was that again? I'm sorry. This
Reconnaissance.
headset keeps going out. How did that go?
One more try.
I'm trying like hooked on phonics. Did not work for me. Like recon.
Okay.
That works.
Reconnaissance.
I thought she had it.
I thought we were going to get there. I thought so too.
Reconnaissance.
That's close. That's really close. Now just make it smooth. Reconnaissance.
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 Oh boy.
Let's go with course recon.
That's funny.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, everybody, make sure
You're
you
welcome.
do
I'm sorry.
all of those things that she just said.
You'll never forget that word again.
Do
Oh
it.
my God.
Pretty much every race you're going to do, as far as I've ever seen, you're going to be able to start with some sort of like information about it online. You're going to have course
That's
maps.
one of the
you're
best
gonna
things you could do.
Yeah.
elevation, right? Everything there. Google Map it.
Mhm.
Everything's there.
There's also a couple of times when we've had to do like race packet pickup. It obviously doesn't work when you have a race that you're doing long distance. It's somewhere else. But I know people that when they were picking up packets here, they were driving the course. Same thing when we did NJ State. We drove the course just to familiarize ourselves with the area and, get comfortable with everything. So if you have an opportunity and you're able to get there, definitely take advantage. Even though it's easier to get the packet mailed to you, it's nice to take a ride when you can and just
Do some
map out the
reconnaissance.
course. Reconnaissance.
Yep.
When every long race that we've done, we've driven the long bike course, and just the idea of like, is there going to be any shade on this thing? And like, I could tell right away when we were in Maryland, like, there's no shade on this course. It's going to be hot if it's hot.
Yep. Any kind of sketchy corners, like road conditions, like I'm not going to remember every pothole, but like, if we go through a 1 mile stretch of like really crappy road, like it's something I'm going to remember. It's, little stuff like that's important.
There's also like Facebook groups and stuff like that definitely participate with, because people are willing to share their experience. And
sometimes those things get crazy.
Yeah, sometimes
though. Some of the things
too
people
much.
put on there is like,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like someone that gives a bad review for something and they're like, I never used it, but I gave it a 1, and you're like, wait, what? So, obviously take it with a grain of salt, but there's some stuff like, from what they say, and I'm banking on it. North Carolina, which we're doing in October, they say that in October, is it?
Yeah, October.
The swim is pretty easy.
Yeah.
It's flat. The current moves with you.
swim is always pretty flat.
Yeah. I think she just
Pretty-
meant like open
There are
ocean waves.
waves.
Pretty
Like-
hard for a downhill swim.
You know what?
That would be nice, though.
I think she just meant like no waves.
Yeah, no waves.
Yes.
Okay.
Like
No
open,
flat water.
Yeah.
flat water.
I knew he was going to say that.
I love being able to drive the course ahead of time on the bike. Any sharp corners, like just stuff that's going to make your race a little smoother.
As we were setting up for the course,
There's someone
there were
practicing.
people
Yeah.
checking it
There
out.
was a
We saw
guy
that throughout the
riding
day.
it. Yeah.
It helps with the anxiety too.
Mhm.
Just,
Yeah.
you know, once you, I always get in my head of like trying to figure out how everything's going to go, and that when I can see it, it's like, okay, it just makes me a little bit more at ease.
Yeah. We've already talked about like the course profile we just mentioned, right? It's there.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about in the things that we said about the different distances, knowing you're going to do different pacing strategies for different distances. Clearly, your sprint is not going to be the same as a 140.6. So think about that. And another thing to think about is like your previous performances.
Yeah, that's probably the best. I mean, especially if you've done that race or something similar, like looking at those things are really important.
Yeah, if you've done one flat race, you're going to do something very similar that's also flat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same distances. You can pull on that history and see if, well, what you can either do the same or do different or change your training, what you're going to do. And we talked in the beginning of the episode about your experience. Experience is a big deal. So first race is going to be different than your 10th race.
Yeah.
Who's got another one?
Well, I mean, goal time is important. Kind of mentioned it at the beginning.
James' favorite.
Yeah. James always likes to
put a bet on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many of you got, like, when you guys come up with your goal times, how do you go about doing it?
Based on past experience. I mean, you guys know I usually don't try and set a specific goal time. I mean, I do like, I wish I could do this, but I don't know. I do it more by, I look at what pace I think I could do as opposed to goal time, because goal time could change the day of. So many things could interfere, and then you get caught up on that goal time.
Right.
Yeah.
I like to think of goal time in, I think, 4 or 5 different little mini goals. Because if you say your goal is, let's say for 70.3 to do, I don't know, less than 6 hours, and you have that goal, if you have a really bad swim or a really bad bike, then all of that is just in one number.
Yeah.
But if you break it up and say, okay, my goal for the swim is to do, I'm making up numbers, 30 minutes. And then you kind of hit that goal. You're like, cool, I hit that goal. And then you say, you know, T1 for this race is like a mile away from swim. So I have to wear shoes to get there. Again, that can overall goal just kill it. But if you break it up, you can say, okay, my goal for transition is 1 minute or 3 minutes or 10 minutes. And then your goal for the bike is whatever. Then you kind of hopefully hit that one, and that feels good. And then the run. And overall, if you put it together,
it works out. That's what I'd rather look at it like that, in smaller pieces. Like, this is the goal swim I want to have. This is my goal pace, and have a range of what my power is going to be on the bike and a range of what my run's going to be, and then see how well it comes together.
Yeah, that's the way I do it. Exactly like you said. I don't come up with a goal time for like an overall goal time until I've worked through all the different parts and like, okay, my swim goal, my bike goal, my run goal. And then I'm like, oh, that ends up at this. Okay, that's now my goal, you know? And like you said, little things can change here and there, but I kind of hope like, oh, if I'm a little bit slower in the swim, that something good will happen on the bike or whatever. And maybe I'll still end up there, or maybe I won't. But the overall time is just the sum of the parts that I kind of work on.
Yeah.
I always try to just, depending on the distance, like just try to match where I was, depending on the race, take some factors into consideration. But most likely from when I did my last race, I'll look at those numbers and just say, where could I have improved?
Yeah.
You know, what can I really have done better?
Good way to do it.
So yesterday when I looked at my numbers, I know where I am with running. And I was like, you know what, my running really, at this point, like there's always room for improvement, but that's really, I was happy with that run because I was like, that was better than I expected. And that's kind of where I live. I know I'm not going to take 2 minutes off of my run time. So, but if I can keep, you know, focusing on that number and making that a little bit better. And but I also know that same time isn't going to be the same for my 70.3.
Right.
So I can make those adjustments and, take that and look at my last 70.3 and say, if I can, you know, be in some little range, then I'll be happy with that.
Yeah. And I think there's like lots of value to what you just said, where if you take, like you just had a good 5K at the end of a race, like you take that and you're like, okay, so I held, I don't know what your time was, but like you held a certain time. you can plug that into an online calculator, and that like now will predict out, okay, if you did that, your half marathon time should be this. Right? So now you at least get an idea of where you can be if you do the training to get up to that point. Like, yes, you might get a little bit faster, but theoretically, you should be able to do, if you did 30 minutes, you should be able to do 2 hours and 10 minutes or whatever the numbers are. Yeah. Now at least you have like, okay, so my trip, that's, 9:40 pace. So let me run some runs at 9:40 pace. And like, just like it lets you get that, turn that goal time from just a pie in the sky dream to like, what does it actually feel like? How can I actually do it? How can I get there? So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned something really key there, right? Doing the training, because you've now figured out, let's say for your 70.3, what your pace is going to be, doing some training at that pace, which is key predictor and like effort for the race. And kind of touched upon the being realistic about your fitness level. Yeah. Where it's going to be.
A funny story that just reminded me of a couple of weeks ago. We did a track workout and we were following times. And I think Rich thought we were at a different distance pace. And he's like, I love you. You can't run that fast. And I was like, but it's supposed to be for like 5K. And he was like, oh, okay. He's like, you can't run that fast. I was like, I know.
I was dying on the inside. I'm like, what is going on here?
But, you need friends who are honest and keep you honest if you're living that pipe dream.
Yeah, that's true. Anything else for goal time? I think that's... the one thing I will say, don't pick a nice round number.
Yeah.
Because people get in the, I want to break 4 hours in the marathon. I want to break 3 hours. I want to go under 6 hours. I want to and whatever. There's unless your numbers happen to line up for that, it's a completely unuseful goal.
To be realistic.
Yeah. Right?
It's totally arbitrary.
Yeah. But it's a nice round number. So it's like, I don't want to see 6s in front of my race. I want to see a 5. Like, okay.
You just want to be able to tell your friends something.
Yeah. So, go where the numbers kind of point you or lead you, and it is what it is. What's next?
I think maybe we talk about some race day conditions.
Sure.
Right, because all of that race planning in the calculators or anything I've seen doesn't really consider whether it's going to be rainy or freezing and you can't feel your legs. I've heard of some crazy races where people were like buying jackets the night before.
Okay.
Right? Yeah.
The Ironman tent, like the merchandise tent, has to love days like that, right? Could you imagine?
Yeah.
It's like, it's going to rain. Let's sell some $300 raincoats.
Jackets.
And that's a big deal because if it's hot, we were talking about this before, and you have heart rate drift, and then you're going to need to dial back on the run, and you're going to need to consider icing yourself, and if there's ice on the course, if you're doing something long, even if you're doing super short, and you're trying to go really fast on the bike. As a risk analyst, maybe you want to consider how fast you're going to take those turns or those UEs, right? And that's going to affect your overall time. And if you plugged it into the calculator, it says one thing, but on race day, it's going to be a different.
Yeah. No, on the PV tri course, you weren't able to pass people at certain spots, a couple spots.
Right. And those are all things that you kind of don't know until you get there. And
there are a couple of times where I knew that we had to stay single file, and I was either, neck and neck with another rider, and I was like, can I take this person out before we have to go single file? And if I could, I'd make sure I went up ahead, and then if not, I had to pull back because I'm like, I'm going to waste too much energy trying to pass this person. Might as well just take the break during the single file, and then I can, really push out afterwards.
Yeah, those are the kind of real-time things.
That also, I know for me, it was mentally hard. It kind of ties in a couple of things. When we did NJ State, the whole weather thing where it was inclement weather, and they were even debating whether or not they should have the race. And then the Olympic that we had initially signed for, that I was preparing for, ended up turning into a sprint.
Yeah,
so now your pacing changes. Like you planned for one pace. Yeah, what did you do?
I did. I mean, it was doable. Obviously, it was less. It's not like you're ever going to get more distance on race day. So that was like, okay. But I realized, I had to push a little bit harder, or I could push a little bit harder. Like I said, I wasn't really familiar with the sprint. So I'm used to like kind of, sitting back on my heels and riding it out. So knowing that I would have to go a little bit faster, or I could go a little bit faster, I wanted to take advantage. I think the hardest thing for me was like the nutrition, because I was planning, more nutrition than I needed. So still not really feeling hungry enough because it's so quick, but knowing that I still had to fuel myself because I was pushing myself harder. And then trying to gauge how would it have been different if I had done the Olympic. So it was like really weird. I was kind of bummed because I was like, I really wanted to test myself again against my numbers the last time I had done it. But yeah, mentally it was interesting. I never experienced that.
I think that, and those are the kind of things, those curveballs get thrown all the time where they cancel the swim because it's rough conditions or something like that. Like, can you adjust on the fly for that? And
sometimes they make it like a run, bike, run, right? Where you have to run twice.
I've heard of those, and thankfully I haven't been in those.
That happened last year at Tough Man, right? Because the pool, the water was so bad quality, they cut the swim, but they made it a duathlon. So it's like, how do you?
Nobody signs up for that.
Tough. Yeah.
It's an easy way to get some podiums, right? Just sign up.
But you talked about the nutrition and hydration plans. That's something to think about.
Yeah. I just I want to get one last thing in on the race day conditions. It's almost, you're always going to have to just slow it down. Like, there's very rarely are the conditions going to change in a way where you're like, oh, now I can really go. Like, right? Almost everything you do is going to make you have to ease off a little bit more.
Unless it's colder, and then you can do a little bit faster.
You can do a little, but like,
yeah.
But I'm always like,
you do the same that you plan, probably.
Yeah, I always like pick my numbers based on ideal, right? And then I adjust off of ideal, and that's always going to be slower.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
No, that was.
So now nutrition, hydration.
We were talking about that. Yeah, Yvonne was talking about it for her NJ State.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should align your nutrition and hydration to the course. So, like, one of the things that's a specific point is usually in races, they will tell you where the aid stations are. So on the run, you need to think about, okay, am I doing run walk? How am I doing the aid station? So that's something to definitely plan for, because it'll affect in the longer races way more than in the shorter races.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of other things with that. Like, it kind of ties into race day conditions. Like, if it's hotter, you're going to need more hydration.
If you're James, you're just going
to always
need more.
If it's colder, you still need it, but maybe not as much. Like, and I think that's why it's important. And I think we all kind of do this where we separate hydration and nutrition, because like my nutrition needs really aren't going to change. Right. I'm going to need the calories I'm going to need, but my hydration needs are going to vary drastically based on conditions. So
you can nutritionally only take in so much, and then you kind of pace that. But hydration wise, like you said, is going to be
vary.
Whatever
totally
that day is.
Yeah.
I love having the timer on my watch. I set it for every 15 minutes.
Too.
Yeah, because it's like sometimes you're just you think you're okay, and it's like even if you don't need it per se, it's like you probably don't know if you need it. If it's colder, I know I don't drink as much when it's cold out because I'm cold. So I just at least take a little swig of something so that I'm keeping up with it. And same thing with nutrition. I just make sure that every 15 minutes, I think it's like every 15 minutes I hydrate, and every the alternate 15 minutes I drink and hydrate so that I can digest.
I really wish I could set 2 different alarms.
You can. I have 2. You can set multiple alarms.
Like a food and a drink?
Yeah. I have them separate.
It says eat, and I'm like,
yeah. It says drink. You could set more than one alarm.
Why do I not do that?
That's a good question.
I don't know.
Let's find out. Let's do some reconnaissance.
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 You go in and just add a new alert.
I feel like there's a reason why it didn't work. Okay. Next time. Okay. Yeah, because I
do odd even, so I know that pretty much on the odd, let's say 10, on the 10s, 30s, 50s.
It's good. I find on the bike time goes so quickly.
Yeah.
So if I don't have it, I forget.
Yeah. My for 70.3s, my standard thing is every 15 minutes I'm taking a gel, the equivalent of a gel.
Mm-hmm.
And then every 10 I'm taking
water.
I have it opposite.
So that I guess that, that should still work, right? I should be able to have at 10, 20, it should say drink, and then at 15, 30.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Now what happens at 30 when both of them go off? They'll both go off.
You drink and you eat.
No, I know how that works. I got that figured out. But I want the alarms.
I have mine every 10 to eat because I take a little bit at a time, and then every 15 to drink.
So at the hour, those go off at the same time?
Those will go off.
And they both go off?
I don't know.
Okay.
And half hour too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when in doubt,
just eat
just
and
drink.
I'm sure the listeners are really interested with my inability to understand.
Please write in and tell us how you plan your timers.
You understand everything else. I mean, come on.
I'm allowed to be confused about some things. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. Do you shut them off or do you just let them go? Or
they just go.
No, it just goes on.
It goes
its own.
throughout the time that you're.
Yeah, but I'm saying as it goes, do you have to click it or do anything?
No, it goes away. No, nothing.
It just goes away. So when it goes away, does the other one pop up?
Yeah, I think so. Mm-hmm.
That's what happens.
We're going to find out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you're.
We'll find out on Sunday.
Oh my gosh.
I don't set my time. I don't have it on my head unit. I don't have those for when we're riding, just normal rides.
Oh, that's right. I
And
have it on.
So
I have it on
wonder
both.
Okay, that's what I was going to.
So
I
when
was
I
wondering
run,
if it's the watch.
When I run, it's on my watch, and when I
Both drink
bike.
and eat.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
She gets 4 alarms. Her computer in front's going off. Her watch is going off.
Marla's just always eating, so it doesn't matter.
Food is good.
I never forget to eat. Why do I need an alarm?
Now, whenever she's like Pavlov, whenever something rings, she's like,
It sounds about right.
Morning
so
alarm
hungry.
goes off. She reaches for that goo.
I have a sandwich, not goo.
just like a little toaster oven next to her bed.
Just a toaster
Ding,
strudel
that's my
pops up.
alarm.
That's her alarm.
Did you ever see The Office
Pop-Tart hits her in the head.
any Office fans where they have the George Foreman grill? He cooks bacon.
Oh, I used to have that.
I think anybody who's about our age had a George Foreman grill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on from nutrition and hydration, let's talk about the transition times.
I like talking about food.
Yeah.
What are we talking about? Transition?
Yeah, that's going to be different. Right? Some
not good at
transitions,
it.
they tell you to bring shoes. I always,
What?
you deal with it.
You don't bring shoes.
You don't bring shoes, you just do it. I've
What are
done
you talking
one
about? To
for
walk?
transition.
Oh.
Yeah, there was one, I think Six Flags was like that. It was a mile or something away from the swim.
I mean, if it's going to be like that.
and then
Yeah.
you just
Wow.
bring
We brought
shoes and
shoes
then
to
you have
ours.
to do that.
To
You
Connecticut.
guys did, the Connecticut
Mhm.
one was with that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so you had to put shoes on to get to.
It was a quarter
transition?
mile uphill gravel
Gravel.
road run to transition.
It was they were like, how hard can we make?
How can we make this suck even more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Mission
so when everybody went in the
accomplished.
water, they took one shoe away. That's how they made it
I
harder.
could just grab anyone's shoe. I'm I don't have time looking for my shoe. Whatever. It's
Yeah.
how many hokas can I pull out? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Ugh, I hope it's not. Well, transition's gonna be weird for North Carolina, right?
Yeah,
It's
that's going to be a challenge. That's something that's going to have to go into planning. 2 separate T1 and T2 are different.
Yeah.
That's going to be stressful.
There's a decently long run from the water to T1. Yeah, challenge.
Yeah.
But those people who plan for it can make up time. I think a transition is a huge place to save time, right? And
Right off the bat, yeah. But eventually you do
or
get
to
diminishing
lose time.
returns.
or to lose time. I'm kind of fall into that category a lot of times, I think, because I get people run past me hard out of the water in transition, and that's just for whatever reason I can't get my legs moving.
I can't either.
I feel like I'm still in the water as I'm trying to run, and I feel like that's definitely once I get to my bike, I'm usually pretty quick and efficient at getting onto the bike, but that run.
I'm not good
really
at that
have a hard
either.
time with it. Maybe it's just something I got to practice, but I don't know where you or how you practice that other than
Go in
racing.
Run out
open
of the
water, run
pool.
out, go back,
Yeah.
run out, go back, run out,
Sounds like no fun.
go back, run out.
So yeah, figure out those transitions.
I think you also have to decide like what's more important. If you are looking to be comfortable, especially for the longer distance ones, it's like, is it important to you to take the time to make sure you have everything? If you're going to put on any body glide or anything like that.
Hey, Yvonne has cue cards.
I do.
That's right. We've talked about your cue cards.
I have, but I still had them out on Saturday.
Did you?
Yeah.
Wait, you had them for this race?
I did.
You
I don't
Every race.
necessarily need to look at them, but I do glance at it and just say what do I need for this? And I've also minimized my needs. I actually was thinking about how much more efficient I've gotten at transition of what I really need. But again, I mean, if I for the sprint, I had an extra pair of socks, but I felt okay and I just threw my sneakers on. So it's if it was longer, I might have switched my socks to drier pair, especially because it was a little wet. Yeah, it just depends on.
Wait, so you'll use two pairs of socks in a race?
Not on top of each other.
No.
You change your socks.
You change
between
socks
the bike and
from
what
bike
I do
socks to run socks?
No, I don't use bike socks. I use the same socks but two different pairs sometimes, but I put them in
that's
my
what
sneakers.
I mean. Just
Yeah,
so
so
you
you-
wear one pair of socks on the bike, switch into a new pair of socks for the run.
If I'm feeling like I need to switch.
Just need to freshen up.
Yeah. So what I did
it's
was
gotta go with the outfit. The bike shoes need
My
one pair of
ruffles.
socks.
I usually put them in my shoe so that I can just rip
Yeah, I
off
do
my
that
shoe
too.
and sock,
Yeah.
and then I put my shoe on.
Mhm.
But I didn't need it, so then I just threw my socks out and put my shoes on. So I'm pretty efficient with it.
Huh.
Okay.
So
I mean, what do I know? I didn't wear
You didn't
socks and
wear
got
socks.
freaking blisters.
You need to,
I
you
can't.
need to set some alarms and put on some socks.
Yeah,
Henry didn't wear socks. He got blistered too.
Oh,
but he won. So
I know.
is it worth
yeah.
it?
I'm not. So
well,
that's the
he
thing.
was
I'm
walking
not
around
winning.
after with only one shoe on.
Oh,
so.
yeah?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it.
Did he win though?
He did
He
win.
won.
He did win. He was fast.
Then it's worth it.
I won too
You
I
did.
know, you
with fresh
did.
socks on.
No blisters.
And no blisters, exactly. So you do have to decide, are
Yeah.
you in it for
Yeah.
speed? Are you,
Mhm.
I know you can tape your band your shoes up and do that. I haven't quite figured that out.
Flying mounts.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
pretty
We'll
crazy.
get a video up.
Yeah.
That's my
Enough
next
fun.
thing. I want to learn.
Agile for that.
Cool.
Mental strategy.
We had a whole episode on mental strategy, but
We did.
that's that plays a big part in a flat course versus hilly course,
I think,
open ocean.
yeah.
That's a big part of it. All of it.
I
Full
think
swim.
the planning and having a good laid out plan helps with the mental
Mental.
strategy because now you have things to think about other
Mhm.
than just oh, my legs feel like shit.
Mhm.
Oh, I feel like I'm good, can't breathe. Oh, you're constantly checking in with
How are you
yourself.
inside my head?
Right? You're constantly checking in with yourself. I have on the bike, one of the things I do is I set an auto split for every, right now it's every 3 miles. And I knew for Eagle Man, I was okay, it's a flat course. So my splits should be pretty even other than the wind. And I'm okay, to hit my goal time, I need to see 8 minutes or less every 3 miles. And it's okay. And that every 8 minutes, something was between my eating and drinking. I was constantly thinking about stuff. I'm watching my heart rate. I'm checking in with those things. I'm not oh, we're only 10 miles in. We're, you almost don't make room for the mental
Suck.
demons to creep in because you're busy thinking of other things. It's when you're at work and you're busy at work, the day flies by, So I think that's one. The planning of it by itself just helps with the mental strategy.
Mhm.
I always like to visualize my performance. Whether I know the course or not, I just try to visualize what I know I'm able to do.
When you're on the course?
No,
Or
before,
beforehand? Okay.
beforehand,
Yeah.
always the night before, the morning of, I'm just always envisioning myself finishing everything. I
Yeah.
know I can do it. I know I can run. I know I can bike, so I just envision myself doing those things. And then that is what I pull on when I'm actually doing it. Cause it's I've been here. I saw this. I did this. The venue might not be exactly the same, but, I just kind of go through it over and over in my head, or I'll put myself in. I mean, that's where training is key because you can always put yourself in that scenario that you're in.
Yeah.
I think of when I have 5K to go, I think of the route I do by my house. It's all right, if I was, running it around my house, this is where I'd be right now. So I just kind of try to create this like parallel universe for myself, and that's what gets me going. So I'm like, all right, you're this much in, you're this much in, and just playing those little mind games to familiarize myself with things. When we swim at the lake or something, I'll say, okay, like this is just me being in that lake, and
visualization.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it definitely helps.
I did that too on the run.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you have a mile left. It's just 4 laps.
Yeah.
So I think of the track, like 4 laps is nothing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like to use it when in training, like visualizing what I think the race is going to be like.
Yeah.
Like so in the middle of a hard set or hard interval or something, and I'm like, man, come race day, this is what it's going to feel like. You're going to feel that wind blowing through your hair. You're going to feel how fast it's moving, like all that stuff I like to use, and that helps me get through, a hard training set.
Yeah, this might be a little like extreme, but like I said, when I
let's hear it, we like that.
When I hurt my toe, my little pinky toe, I had.
How did you hurt your toe?
I hurt my little pinky toe because like a little table fell on it. It just like landed right on my toe. And it was right before we had a ride, and it hurt really bad. I thought immediately I was like, that's it. I'm done. Like, I'm not going to be able to do Ramapo Rally. I'm not going to be able to do, like, my training is done. I was picturing myself. I'm like, I'm going to be doing a lot of swimming because I can't do anything.
Because of toe.
Yeah. Like it was just, whatever. So the next day I'm like, okay, let me see how it feels. And I pretty much determined, I could tell I can move it. I'm like, it's not broken. So I went for I had a 3-mile run, and I had a bike before that. So I said, let me try to do the biking on the trainer just in case if it's too hard, I can always stop. And I felt okay. And then same thing with the run. I was actually going for a run with my husband, and he's like, oh, you should like rest it. I'm like, you know what? If this was the day before race day, like I have to see how much I can take. And I'm like, I know it's not broken. If it's bruised, like it's just going to hurt. Like what can I do? And I just ran on it. And it was honestly, I've had worse runs. Like I've had more painful runs. Like this hurt really bad, but it wasn't like the worst run I've ever had. But it's like, I put myself in that position because I'm like, if I had a cramp, if I know poor Rich, he like demolished his toe for AC.
Oh, again. Now
every
you're
episode.
bringing up his toe.
Yes.
God.
It is.
Yes.
I mean, that's like
This was
Every
premeditated.
episode.
This was 100% premeditated.
That's
That toe is going
I
to
thought she
go
was
down
gonna
in
say it.
history as
Thought I needed to say it when she said stand up during the swim.
Oh,
man.
my
I was like, no.
This was 100% premeditated.
not at all.
That
But like I
toe.
was thinking about it, we're like, damn, that sucks. Like you have to like
You just do it.
do the 13 miles on your shredded toe.
Embrace the suck. That was the motto that day.
Yeah.
So if I happen to injure my toe during my race, I'll be like, hey, you got this. You did it.
Thanks for
Okay.
bringing a
Yeah.
great story down with Rich's toe.
Yes.
It was a good story.
It
up
only
until
made
that
it
point.
so much better. 5 stars. All our
Oh,
listeners
my
said
God.
so.
I got you
Would
back.
not recommend.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a lot of the other stuff we sort of talked about, but we should keep going in terms of your race goals also, right?
Yeah.
You want to set your performance goals, so what you want to do in terms of like what your best is going to look like,
Mhm.
and then actually like your goal for what I think we all kind of talked about in different ways, like the process of the race, right?
Yep.
Like either it's like your watch is going off and in the water, and you're like, oh my, whatever 200 split is this, and what's my effort? Or on the bike, like checking in, I need to be doing 5 miles every whatever your time is, and checking in on that, and you're kind of like that execution of your race is another goal, and it occupies your mind, right?
Yeah.
And you got to listen to your body the whole time through. So sometimes numbers are the numbers, but if you feel like you're slushy in your stomach and something, maybe like nutrition changes a little better.
Yeah.
Something happens that way, right?
And listen, some days you're the hammer and some days you're the nail.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you have to be okay with that.
I say sometimes you're the windshield and sometimes you're the bug.
Same thing. Yeah.
But that's something
Yeah.
you should do even throughout training so that
Yes.
when the race comes, you know what you're feeling. Because if you just pay attention to that on race day, you're not going to know
Right.
what you're feeling.
For sure.
You have negative splits on here.
I do. I think it's a nice goal to have. I think it's
Yeah.
nice to consider being able to do that. And I think you sort of set it with your run, right? You make sure your first mile is
Yeah.
Way slower, so that I think you're planning on that negative split on your back end of the run.
Not really.
Yeah, you are.
Negative split is that every mile you get faster and faster as the race goes.
Yeah, or at least the first half
First
is,
half.
or the second half is faster
than
than
the first half.
I just think in reality,
You can do it.
No, I don't know. I don't.
For an ollie, you can do it.
The research says it's not the fastest way to run or to pace.
It's so difficult.
It's not going to get you the fastest time. I do think from a mental aspect, though, there's value in thinking about trying to do it, just because it will hold you back to probably where you should be at the beginning. It keeps you from going out too fast, maybe. So if that's like thinking about trying to negative split, if that results in you even splitting, then that's a good thing. But then do you look at the end of the race and say like, oh, I didn't negative split and get down on yourself? Because I don't know.
It might not be a goal, but it might be something you can.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like
hold yourself to.
For me, I want it even, and like I'm going to go a little bit slower in the first mile, and then hold it.
And I think in the longer the race gets, the more difficult it is, because you get more and more tired by the end comes, and that's a lot of pressure to get to 10 miles where it starts in being like, oh, well, I want a negative split. I want to be faster. Yeah. It's just a lot. I feel like it's a lot of, I don't know, unneeded pressure almost.
Yeah. Like if it's about performance, then I want to, and I've never done this. So I'm like, I might be just talking out of my ass, but like, let's look at every winner of every triathlon, like 70.3 Ironman, whatever, one, how many of them negative split any, the run.
One of the goals that I say, and not negative splits, but I want to do this. I've never done it because of like cramping and stuff like that, but I want my last mile to be my fastest. And I try for it. Mm-hmm. Hasn't happened yet, but I'm not giving up on that goal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a silly little thing, but
no, and I'm like,
I want my last mile.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that idea. Mm-hmm. Because like if that's your goal, then you reach that goal. Does that result in the fastest overall time? Probably not. But if it's something you need to do for yourself to make you feel better, to build some confidence, to help you go into the next race saying like, hey, you know what? I ran 8-minute pace, and at the end I ripped off a 7-minute mile. Mm-hmm. Like now I can do 750s for the whole race, and like that's going to help you in the long run.
That means I had energy to do that last mile.
You know,
I've accidentally done it, and I say that because it's not my plan going in. But when I get to that end, all right, if I feel good, okay, let's go. But that just probably means that I paced the beginning correctly,
or even too slow,
or maybe too slow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I've had that happen in a time trial on the bike before, where I see the 1K to go sign at the end of a 40K time trial, and I'm like, let's go. And I punched it. And like, I should not have been able to do it. And man, I didn't put enough into it. And it was one of those, I think I've talked about it on the show before. It was one of the best days I've ever had on a bike. And I like get into it, put my watts where they should be. And I'm like, nope, too easy. Bump it up by 10 watts. Nope, too easy. Bump it up by another 10 watts. And I'm like, I'm scared to go harder. But I still had it left at the end. And I'm like, oh, what could I have done? Like I was just on one of those special days. Yeah. But,
Does that frustrate you more? Because then you're like, oh, I could have pushed it more.
Well, this happened in 2007 and I'm still talking about it. So I guess there's a little bit there that wonders what I could have done.
Yeah.
Like James, he's got a score to settle with that one. Yeah. James has it with every race.
Even the races he doesn't do.
Yeah. So I think like the idea of a negative split is probably more of a valuable thought than the execution of a negative split. But yeah. And I mean, that's what, consider aiming for a negative split, which is, I think that's a good aim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We've talked about Reconnaissance.
It's a strange time period in our in our quad pod history.
It came right after the Dark Ages.
Listen, it's spelled the same basically.
Yep. It's great.
That's what the French were walking around saying.
Yep.
Wait, just to be clear, I knew it was a different word. Like, I just couldn't say it.
Yeah, we all have those. We stare at a word that's spelled and you're like, what the hell is that?
That was me yesterday with some of the names.
Oh, yeah.
That's the worst.
Like, Rich, what? I can't pronounce this name.
The next thing we have on here is got to be the most important. I think it's the most important thing we're going to talk about. Practice pacing during training.
Yeah, and just start throwing that in.
You have to be able to do that. You have to. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. And like, what about bricks? Like how that comes into play?
Yeah.
Like being able to hold that pace after like a ride or after.
Yeah. I always feel like the most valuable thing from a brick is getting off the bike and being able to run at race pace.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I really don't have too many times where I've asked my athletes to do like, a 2 or 3 hour ride and then go for an hour easy run. Like it's almost always just a couple of miles, get that feel for race pace, like dial it in, feel what your legs are going to feel like, and then shut it down. But, yeah, I think it's super important.
It's as simple as that, and it's as important as
yes.
that.
Yep.
All right. The next one is having a backup plan, right?
Unforeseen circumstances. Yeah.
Always come up.
We've hit on kind of all the things that might come up, I think, that would make you modify your plan.
But I mean, we didn't talk about like if you get a flat, right? That's an unforeseen circumstance, but do you change your pacing strategy? No.
You adjust your goal.
You adjust
your goal, right? But not your pacing strategy.
Right. So there are things, but
I mean, maybe unless you're sitting there for 20 minutes, like, is that enough time to recover a little bit and push harder?
20 minutes.
If I was sitting there for 20
on
minutes.
A long
I'd
race?
be like waiting for a car to pick me up.
Yeah.
I don't know. Because then you also like
you're probably going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably going to get amped up and just blow up right after there. So, yeah. Okay. And then I kind of hit on this, the race day energy. Like you have to factor in that adrenaline and the excitement. It's going to have an effect on you. For me, it's the heart rate. Like my heart rate's naturally elevated because of that adrenaline. But you have to manage it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, how about like realizing that you're not going to hit your goal and not like losing
That's
it?
That's a tough one. I've had that happen to me. That happened to me at Muscle Man last year. Like I had a number in my head and early in the run, I knew it wasn't going to happen. And like I think that was probably the biggest, like just constant thing that was eating at me, and my mental health at that point was just like, nope, not happening. Nope. So I'm like, what the hell are you doing? So I
think the best athletes, and I have no scientific proof of this, have a plan B, C, D, all as many plans as possible for every possible contingency to adjust to whatever needs to be adjusted. So if swim doesn't go well or goggles get knocked off, I don't know. I think you need to, your race plan is like, I think Greg or Mary, I don't remember who said it, was like there's an ideal and then pretty much that's not going to happen race day.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about more is like, maybe you did everything. Everything's great. Everything's going exactly to plan, but you're like, I can't do it. Yeah. Like I'm the nail today or I'm the bug. Like
could have been sick the night before.
What you just said, Greg, that's why I don't like to have an overall goal be like the end all be all. Because like you said, it pretty much never goes exactly as planned. Mm-hmm. And then you start realizing, your swim goes terrible, like what happened to James. And then you're like, well, I'm never going to hit my goal. And then you're down on yourself when in reality, if you just forget that and just do the bike as best you can, do the run as best you can, you never know what might happen.
Yeah.
I think one of the better pieces of advice, and feel free to correct the wording of it, but is like, don't try to make it up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if you lost 10 minutes in transition because you couldn't find your shoe, don't try to make it up.
No,
just stick to what you can do.
And stick to, all right, swim didn't go well. All right, forget it. Get on your bike and do that the best you can.
Yeah, but not
focus on just that for now, not the whole overall thing. Just focus on what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Don't try to catch up.
Yeah. That's, it's funny. Like, and I suck at that. Like that's because I'm so analytical when it comes to all this and I've got everything mapped out. I'm like, this will get me this will get me that. Yeah. Like that number puts itself into my head automatically. Like I can't not get it. Right. But like I coach golf, and one of the things I tell my golfers, like after I see them having a bad hole, I'm like, they get all ticked off and whatever. And I'm like, what's it say on the next hole? What's the score you have written down for the next one? They're like, I don't have anything there yet. And I'm like, exactly. You're starting from zero right there. Like, don't worry about what happened there. Let's write a good number down next.
Yeah.
And like, I have to tell myself that when I'm racing or training or whatever, but
it's hard.
My brain, it's really hard.
It's
and
hard.
my brain doesn't naturally gravitate towards that kind of like, okay, we're starting over again. I'm like,
you want to have
shut up, weakling.
2:30 bike split. You didn't hit a 2:30 bike split. You're not catching 30 minutes on the run unless
right.
It's
It sounds like it's more realistic to focus on those goals during training.
Yes.
And hitting those goals then. It's like anything else. It's like if you're going to school and you're studying for a test, it's like you might be a great student. You understand everything. And on test day, it's like something happens. Same thing with training. It's like you can hit those goals so that you can hopefully, you know, if all goes well, hit those goals on the race. But at the same time, like race day is just going to be race day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Enjoy it. Smile as much as you can.
Smile and wave.
Smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave.
Awesome. Well, I think those are great points to kind of end on.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else they'd like to mention?
Nope.
Awesome.
Covered a lot.
We hit everything.
We did. We hit on a lot of things. Hopefully you guys listening found some useful stuff out there so that your next race can be planned out a little bit better, help you show all that fitness that you've built up through training. And show it out there on the race course. Maybe bring home some hardware.
Like Yvonne.
All right. So thanks everybody for listening. This has been a fun episode of the Quad Pod, and we look forward to coming back next week with a new topic for you. Thanks for listening. Thanks everyone for listening to the Next Level Quad Pod. We really appreciate you spending time with us and listening to everything that we have to offer. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review and a rating. Those little things go a long way towards us being able to bring you more content like this. If you'd like to learn more about what we have to offer, please go to our website at goteamnltry.com. There, you can find out about all the different things we provide that can help you reach your athletic potential. Thank you again for finding time in your busy schedule to spend some time with the Quad Pod.